Hey, how you doing out there? So I'm sitting here with Lugo Entertainment, who runs a YouTube channel that has unbiased, honest game reviews, mostly MMOs, and we're here to discuss what the fuck did Bungie spend $500 million on with Destiny? So what's going on, Lugo? What do you want to say?
It's going pretty good. I'm doing pretty well. I got Destiny last night and just been playing it, trying to uncover where the $500 million went. I'm enjoying it. It's an all right game, but my standards are pretty high when I see $500 million, especially since it's the biggest gaming budget that's out there. So
Yeah, it is pretty shocking. I mean, I watched you on a live stream yesterday, in fact, for about 4 hours. I was still trying to find it as well. I mean, it just looks, I don't really think it even looks like an MMO, to be honest. What do you think about that?
Well, Destiny, it's very interesting. One of the things that I uncovered, as I was playing, because I didn't play the alpha or beta or anything like that. I wanted to be a fresh, game, and that's what I typically do with games that I'm really hyped up about. I'll wait for it to come out. I won't play the betas or anything like that. And so when I hopped into it, I noticed right away with you guys, because you guys were watching me on the live stream, that it was basically forced co-op. So you would hop into a mission, and there would be maybe 3, 4, 6 people or so that were doing the mission with you or just exploring. And those people can be any level that they wanted to be, because Destiny, even though there's a leveling system, it's not like someone who's the cap level of 20 or the higher cap of 30. It's not like they're going to really be that much more overpowered in a sense. I mean, yes, they're going to be way more powerful, but they're not going to ruin your experience if you're playing with them. So we saw, level 6s, level 10s. I think we saw even a level 20. And it's not an MMO in the sense of there's thousands of people that are in the zone at one time. It's more going towards the Dragon Nest and Vindictus route, where there's a main central hub called the Tower, where there's a good amount of people, which in this case, there's only about 16 people in the tower at one time. I think I counted a little bit last night just to see how consistent it was, and it was about 16 players. So it's not an MMO in the sense of scale, but it's an MMO in the sense of you're constantly playing with people all the time, and it's pretty much persistent in that case.
Well, yeah, that's what I picked up about it. But I mean, to me, it really just looks like a co-op game, not like anything else, but it's like forced co-op, right? That's about it.
Exactly.
MMO to me is like Dungeons and Dragons, 10,000 people, like EverQuest or something. That's what I think of right away. And
Yeah.
it just wasn't there with Destiny at all. I didn't see that at all.
Yeah, and that's what's really odd about it too, because when it comes to the next gen consoles, having a lot of people on screen would have to be transparent, see through, like where you could walk through them. I can't think of the proper term off the top of my head, but with Destiny, when you're in the tower, you can walk through people, so they're not solid objects, they're not solid polygons. Of course, they're moving around, they have their armor on, they have their effects off their armor, stuff like that they have to render, but I'm not really too sure why they just didn't make each of the cooperative zones, maybe 30 people or, 40 people even. Because yes, maybe the Xbox One couldn't handle that. Honestly, the graphics on the Xbox One compared to the PS4, they're not really that much different. When it comes down to it, after the live stream, I turned down my brightness just one notch, and it looked exactly like the PS4 version right after that. Very sharp, very contrasted. It was a lot better looking. But when you look at MMOs that are currently on consoles, Planet Side 2 being on the PS4, having thousands of people, one map, and you have games like Warframe, which is more of the Destiny style, but has really good graphics. You have a game like DC Universe Online that, yes, it's cell shaded, where it's not like, realistic graphics, but it still is a really good graphic scheme. But even that game has a lot of people on screen at one time. Why couldn't they at least increase the player counts inside of Destiny and still hit the 1080p at 30 frames per second, by doing that? Because it would make it more so feel like an MMO. Of course, you don't want that out in the zones, because the zones are actually quite small. I mean, you can explore them and, stuff like that, and find little nooks and crannies that you can go off and, play for hours in. But the scale of the game is quite small compared to a game like, Star Wars Old Republic. That's a 200 million budget game.
Whoa.
that has huge zones and a lot of, areas for you to go in and, explore, and a lot of dungeons for you to go in and get loot in, and raids, and, PvP war zones, stuff like that. And of course, that game is now quite old. It went free to play. It was pay to play at launch, and it's now widely successful because it went free to play. But Destiny had a $500 million budget, and they didn't really seem to use a lot of it on the actual game. It seemed to all go into marketing.
Yeah, that's what I was reading about. Like, a lot of it goes into promoting, marketing, all that stuff. But when you say that there's not enough people, maybe that's because they're trying to make the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 version, like, I don't know, the same experience. Maybe that's what they tried. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, and they made an article a while back. I can't remember what website did it, but they made an article about how Destiny on the PS4 is not drastically different visual wise than it is on the Xbox One, for example, because they try to make them an even slate across the board, across all systems. And it's also not 1080p 60 frames per second on the PS4 because that as well. They wanted to be very consistent across all platforms. And I'm not sure what the specs are on the Xbox 360 and PS3 as far as the resolution and the frame rate goes, but I would assume it's probably anywhere between 720p to 900p at 30 frames per second. That way it's a little bit less than the next gen consoles, but visually, like as far as its aesthetics and its fidelity, as far as the overall graphic scheme, I would guess it probably looks about the same. I mean, maybe a little bit more blurry, but probably looks about the same. I mean, that's what I would guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're gonna downscale it up. I mean, downscale it down, right? Sooner or later, just to make it fit and play smooth. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing with Destiny. It's really strange to me because we've seen a lot of great games come from Bungie. Some people don't like the Halo games. That's a fine and dandy, but they have won Game of the Year titles. They've won many awards. But Halo 3, I have noted here, they had a budget of $60 million. Now, Halo 3 was the last Halo game I played through the entire campaign of. I thought Reach was a bore fest, so I didn't play a lot of that game. I played the multiplayer, but I didn't play the campaign. But $60 million, you look at the $500 million budget, even if we got, minus off $200 million for like Star Wars The Old Republic, budget, and that also includes their marketing, and they marketed the living hell out of that game.
Oh, yeah.
You're still left with $300 million. So if they spent over $300 million on just marketing, which they probably did, because there's no other way, unless they, like we said during the stream, or, just in general, joking around, where they got a bunch of alcohol and hookers in their office or something, where did that money go? The game is not, anything giant. It's, the scope of the game is quite small when you're looking at that budget. And honestly, Mass Effect, every single Mass Effect game is bigger than Destiny is overall. Borderlands 2 is probably bigger than Destiny. Honestly, I can't say as of right now if that's the case, but I would assume it probably is, because Borderlands is a quite big game as far as its scale goes. And it just seems like, yes, it's a polished game, it's solid, but where'd the money go?
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, to me, it looks just like any other type of game without, I mean, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I was reading an article where it said that they had 500 people working on Destiny compared to Halo Reach, which had 150 people. So they're paying more people to develop it, sure. But I just don't see it. Like, I don't see the money. It had more than half had to go to advertising and marketing, because really, you think about it, I heard about Destiny a long time back at like Sony E3, like the PlayStation 3. They're like, oh, Bungie's working with Activision to create this awesome game. We've been hearing about it for years. So this has been in development for years and years and years. So maybe 500 people times, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 years. Maybe that added up a little bit and took a chunk out of that. But I just don't see it. The game just looks like any other game. Maybe it's polished more, but it's supposed next gen, so it's going to look polished. It better look polished, especially the game like that.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's not like anything breathtaking graphically wise, like, say, Rise Son of Rome, even though that game gameplay wise wasn't, anything to talk about. I mean, it's like a value bin game is what I would call it, and would recommend it to anyone. If you found it in a value bin for like $10, $15, yeah, go for it. It's very beautiful. But with Destiny, it had a great art style. We all said that in the live stream. Yeah, it looks good. But gameplay wise, it's not massive. Gameplay wise, it's not innovative. Voice acting wise, there's not too much voice acting for $500 million in it. I mean, Star Wars Old Republic $200 million, and most of that game was voice acting. I mean, there was a huge amount of voice acting in Star Wars: Old Republic. And with Destiny, yeah, you have a cutscene here and there, but most of the voice acting is Peter Dinklage, which I'm sorry, Peter Dinklage. I love you to death. I love your role in Game of Thrones as Tyrion, but you should not have been the robot. I mean, if anything, you should have been the main character's voice that you're actually playing as, but not the robot, because his voices seem so lifeless. And it's almost so, when I was doing the stream, I didn't really have the volume up really loud because I watched some streams of other people and I saw his voice was really lifeless. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll just read subtitles. And that's pretty sad because Peter Dinklage is one of my favorite actors. Yeah, I could not stand hearing his voice inside of Destiny. And so so it's really one of those things where, yes, the game visually looks great. The soundtrack's phenomenal. The sound effects are really weighted, really heavy, really deep. And there's a good amount of depth in the game. With the weapons they upgrade, you can add perks to the weapons. There's perks that your character has that increase over time. There's separate classes, like subclasses, that each character has, like each different class has, but there's still only 3 classes. So if you multiply the subclasses, together with the actual classes, you're only getting 6 different play styles. And then you have your Crucible PvP, which I've been playing quite a lot, which has multiple maps as well, but not really a drastic amount of maps, like maybe the amount of stock maps a standard Call of Duty game that has at launch. So you have, a standard amount of maps that you get to play on for Crucible, and then you have I think if I'm correct on this, I think there's the Earth, I think there's the Moon, I think there's the Tower, I think there's Mars, and then I think there's Venus. So a total of 5 different zones. I'm not, 100% on that, but that's really what I'm seeing with the Crucible maps is those are the only planets. Obviously the Tower is not one of those, maps, but those are the only planets. Those 4 planets are the only ones that are themed after, inside the campaign. So there's not really a lot of zones for you to even go in. And so unless there's like way more content than I'm seeing on the surface, which I really don't think there is, this game could have been made with less than $100 million easily. I mean, even $60 million, the size of the Halo 3 budget, if they were really efficient with it. I mean, and Halo 3 was marketed too. So that's $60 million. That's not all production of the game. That's just everything in total. It's really strange to me. It really is.
I read a couple of things where they already got their $500 million back because this is like the best-selling new video game IP in history. The pre-orders are out the roof, blah, 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 breaking records, all that stuff because it's so overhyped. It was marketed so well, plus it being part of Bungie and Activision, that's 2 giants just doing good things for that, So I can see DLC coming out left and right for this and money because that's kind of how they make their business. That's kind of how they do it.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing a release status on like GameStop.com's website for the expansion passes, but I'm assuming it's not going to be, way down the line. I'm assuming, just like with any season pass, it's going to be rolled out a month or 2 months later. When it comes down to it, though, this is just Activision at their finest. I mean, as much as I am a Bungie fanboy for life. I love Bungie games. I am a huge fan of the Halo franchise. I bought an Xbox One just to play Halo, even though it's with 343 now. I still love the Halo franchise. And when it comes down to it, when I saw Activision acquired Bungie, I was disheartened, let's just say that, because I saw Activision merge with another company that I really liked called Blizzard Entertainment. And as soon as they did that, the quality of the game plummeted. And that's honestly when you started seeing a decline of subscribers within World of Warcraft is when Activision tied in with them and started making them produce a bunch of crap that was recycled, regurgitated shit. And so when it comes down to, Destiny being released and having an expansion pack, it's not surprising to me because it's Activision at their finest. It really is. They're a very greedy company. They're really well off, and they're really good at being greedy. I mean, if I wanted to be, milking my fan base of money, I'd definitely, join Activision. But it just goes to show you that when Bungie signed with Activision and, sort of laughed at Microsoft, they basically laughed at Microsoft, which in this case would be like, I guess you could say, the baby devil. And then they basically started hugging and, warming up to Activision, which is the giant, behemoth devil that is of the entire industry right now. I mean, they have Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and now they have the minds behind Halo all wrapped around their finger. And so it's not good for the industry. And we just saw that with the $500 million budget of Destiny. We got an average game. It's a good game. It's addicting, but it's an average game. It didn't blow me away. The story isn't really that great. I mean, it's all right, but it's just average. There's no reason why they should have spent $500 million on it. It just doesn't make sense.
I can't make any sense of it either. I still can't. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Could advertising cost that much? It couldn't cost that much. There's no way. People are already talking about it anyway. Like, that's advertising anyway, word of mouth, and just seeing it on social media, whatever it is.
It just couldn't, because, I mean, you think of Halo, all the Halo games. If Halo 3 is about the budget of all the other Halo games that are out there, being at the 60 million, that includes marketing on that. And Halo, all the Halo games, they sold like hotcakes. So, with 60 million being the budget for marketing and development for the Halo games, for each of them, about, obviously that's just a rough number because that's just Halo 3's. Those games sold like hotcakes, made ridiculous amount of money. We've seen all the Mass Effect games sell like hotcakes. We saw Star Wars Old Republic, even though it wasn't, that popular at launch, it's making its money back in droves now that it's free to play, have a $200 million budget, which is definitely, includes production and also marketing, that make its money back. And sure, Destiny made its money back as well, according to the article that you brought up, and I've seen that around the entire internet today as well. But when we all think of the budget, even if, like I said, if they took Destiny and they would have had to spend at least $400 million of its budget, just to be generous, let's just say, $350 million of its budget on marketing, because the development of the game couldn't have been over $150 million. I'm sorry, because Star Wars Old Republic, they had to hire so many voice actors. They had to hire, not only voice actors, but script writers. They had to hire game developers, cinematographers even they hired to make the game look cinematically, good throughout the entire, course of the storyline. And they had a total of, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I think about 6 or 7 separate stories across 2 factions. So about 12 different fully voice acted stories. Keep in mind that could be off by 1 or 2 storylines. But still, that's over 12 storylines that they had fully voice acted, and Destiny's only able to do 1. No matter what class you choose, it's the same exact storyline, same exact pathing to level yourself up. It just baffles my mind as an MMO player, because if this released on the PC and it was released as the next best MMORPG, and a lot of people are even talking about how this game was overhyped trash and stuff like that, it would be torn apart because it doesn't have content. And so they're kind of good. It's kind of good that they stayed away from the MMO word, because if they call this a straight up MMORPG with FPS elements and called it an MMO FPS, they would be just dying right now. And so I guess you could just call this an online FPS, as a result. And so when you look at this game, if it was a fully single player experience, because I know you hate multiplayer,
I do.
Would you play Destiny from what you saw of my stream last night?
If it was like free, yeah.
If it was
seriously, I just don't see anything that's appealing about it. It just looks like every other first-person shooter, which a lot of those have been doing that lately. Mm-hmm. I just don't see anything that's like so graphically friendly. Like, nothing. I'm not excited about it at all. No.
Yeah, and that's really the thing, because I mean, story-wise, if the gameplay wasn't good, I'd be like, really, Bungie? Really? You made us wait this long for a mediocre story at best. Yes, it's interesting. Yes, it keeps you going. But overall, what really does it for me with Destiny that makes me not, regret buying it and makes me actually excited to play it is the gameplay, the environments, even though there's not very many of them, and just the overall design of the game. It's good. But whenever I look at the $500 million budget, I'm like, really, Bungie? Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you spending that much money?
So, I told you, man. Yeah. It's all hookers, I'm telling you. It had to be hookers during development.
It had to be hookers and blow, man. There was probably throwing parties every night, going to clubs, I'm surprised they probably didn't make their own club with a $500 million budget, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't.
Well, you know what? Maybe because like you said that was like an old announcement. Maybe they built it on the last gen, like PS3 and Xbox, and then they're like, "Oh, new gen's coming," so they had to rebuild it for that again and again. Maybe because they did it like so fucking weird and so long. Maybe that took a lot of development cost. Maybe that's what that was.
That's possible. I was thinking about that. I was thinking because, with Blizzard right now, also with Activision, as we mentioned before, they are trying to make a game that is going to follow up their very massively popular game called World of Warcraft, and they dubbed it Titan. Well, Titan was supposed to, start having some gameplay trailers, stuff like that coming out, but then they completely scrapped the game because they didn't like it how it was. So it's very possible, like you said, that they were building the game before and they either ran into a lot of engine issues or they just wanted to redo the entire game because they didn't like the way it was sort of made. But I mean, that would make sense in regards to the budget. I mean, maybe that took it from a 100 million game to a 200 million game as far as the development budget, and then tack on the $300 million of marketing. Or maybe even they spent $150 million before they realized they didn't like the product, and then made another 150 million. Who knows? I don't know where the budget went. That way we could see this was development, so this is probably what happened, and then they spent this much on marketing. But considering there was so much commercials for it, it wouldn't surprise me if most of the budget, especially like even if it was $400 million of advertising, if it was $400 million of advertising, it wouldn't really surprise me that much. I saw so many commercials. I saw so much hype for this game. It had so much placement on E3. It was ridiculous. It had so many placement at other game shows, and it had so much hype around it, and they did so well at hyping it up. It's more than just a game. So it would make sense if it was a $400 million budget for just marketing alone, and then $100 million for the game, because I don't see how they could have spent over $100 million for this game. It just doesn't make sense to me unless they had to rebuild it from the ground up, like you said. But even then, they're still spending a few $100 million on marketing nonetheless.
Well, yeah, because from what I understand from how you make a game and how you advertise a game, 15% of the budget goes to advertising. But I do remember for Sony's E3, that was the first game we seen. Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe that took a lot of money. And then, like you said, like seeing it all over the place on Twitch and YouTube and your backyard, it was everywhere. So maybe that could probably be. I think that's crazy, but apparently it worked because they got the $500 million just right away.
Yeah, and then they had I'm not sure if they included this. I really doubt that they included this. Like, so much doubt that I know it probably never happened, but maybe they spent money on getting the white PlayStation 4s out. Maybe there was a branding deal with Sony that they had to spend a lot of money on. I mean, you never know what those types of things, because it's specifically branded and bundled with Destiny for a reason. That was sort of their package. So maybe that was a deal that they had to make under the table. It's like, hey, we'll pay this amount if you bundle your white PS4s with Destiny and call it sort of the Destiny bundle. Or maybe Sony paid them that much. That way, this pumped it even more into marketing. So it's really weird how that exchange went, because Bungie, as we all know, was Microsoft's go-to development company for Halo. And then they went over to basically the Sony brand because they've been basically, rubbing up against Sony like, hey, we're over with you guys now. We'll give you guys exclusive content. Screw Microsoft and the Xbox One. And so Bungie just overall has been, sucking up Sony. So maybe Sony was working together with them, maybe making some deals with them, and that those deals ended up costing even more money that this tacked onto the budget. Very unlikely, like I just said, but it's still something else that could have been done to make this budget as big as it is. Because even with movies, one of the biggest movie budgets I think was $756 million. I think that's Avatar's budget, if I remember off the top of my head.
Good God.
So yeah, so that movie budget was astronomical, and it showed because of how beautiful the movie was, even though the story was completely awful. Kind of the same thing with Destiny. But it was still visually beautiful for its time. I mean, of course it's going to age and no one's going to care about it anymore after a while, but it still was very beautiful for its time. But it was 750 million. I'm actually trying to look that up right now to make sure I'm not off on that. But
That's crazy.
yeah, so it's just crazy to me. It really is. So no, Avatar was actually 425. No, 760 million. There we go. Yeah, no, that was 425 million. So yeah, 425 million. So it was less than Destiny. So the top movie budget of all time is less than Destiny's budget, and it just
That makes
doesn't.
no sense.
It doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. Movies, they're typically, higher budgets. We don't see, because I'm looking at a top 20 list for movies, and the number 20 on this list is at a $200 million budget. We don't see a lot of games with $200 million budgets. We saw it with Star Wars: The Old Republic, which got talked about a lot. Like, oh my God, where'd you guys spend, that amount of money, on the game? Like, where did all that go? And then it ended up flopping soon afterwards and went free to play. It is also known as one of the biggest pay to play flops of all time. And so we saw that game with its $200 million budget. And I don't think there's really been a game that's had a massive budget since, because they were scared to do it. And then on top of that, now we have a huge astronomical budget with Destiny, setting the bar at 500 million. And it comes out decent. Like, I don't doubt it will have 7s to 8.5s for scores, probably more than that, because IGN will probably get paid money to give it a 10 out of 10 Game of the Year award.
Game of the year.
Game of the Year,
It's
Destiny.
Game of the Year material.
Yeah, Game of the Year 2014, Destiny. But when it comes down to it, 500 million, I expected a lot more. Like, I expected a completely in-depth experience, phenomenal story, great voice acting. Sorry, Peter Dinklage, once again, sorry. But, I expected a phenomenal experience. And it's polished, like I said. I keep coming back to it because it's a decent game. It's nothing phenomenal. But would it ever be even talked about for Game of the Year or MMO of the Year or anything like that, in my opinion? Hell no. Because the story's not there. And even though the universe is interesting, we've seen it in a lot of other things. You were born. No one cares about your backstory because you probably were a complete asshole in your past. And now you're set off to destroy the darkness. Darkness has to be killed. There you go. Destiny's storyline. I spoiled it for you right there. Now you're just on your journey, your $500 million journey. It's Destiny.
That is terrible. That is just fucking terrible. No, you know what? It really doesn't look that much better than Halo, though. Or it doesn't look that much better than, I don't know, like anything, really. Like, there's nothing that, like really jumped out and impressed me. Not a damn thing in that game.
Yeah, honestly, gameplay-wise and storytelling-wise, it doesn't really remind me of Halo that much. It honestly reminds me of 343 Studios Halo 4. And that even makes me kind of grin even more, because a lot of people called that a Call of Duty clone, like this combined Halo and Call of Duty, and it had a baby. But in the end, that's kind of what happened with Destiny. I mean, yeah, you can jump up and throw an awesome light orb to the ground and do a lot of cool things. Because I actually changed classes because I was getting really bored of the Hunter class, so I went with the Warlock. And yeah, the Warlock's really fun. It is. But in the end, the gameplay, the shooting is very much like Call of Duty. The guns, there's not really much of a variety as there is in, say, Borderlands. I mean, Borderlands, there's a ton of different types of guns in that game. You think of games like Saints Row, they have a dubstep gun. You can run around with dildos and, wield those if you want. There's a bunch of random stuff in that game. But with the Destiny, there's not really a lot of different guns out there that have different models, that have different effects, that have different styles of play. And that's really where some people who say that it's not really a Borderlands clone are kind of correct, because the game itself, it does go off of the grind, get better gear, grind some more, get better gear, that type of approach like you would see in any MMO or like a Borderlands game. But there's not as much loot that's dropped off bosses. I mean, there's maybe a couple guns here and there. I mean, yeah, phenomenal. But even in my live stream, you guys saw me get maybe one chest, and I get maybe one or two chests here and there that are just randomly found throughout the world. But off of standard mobs, you don't get much off of them unless it's something that's going to happen at cap for me. But right now, you don't really get much off of them. So there's not even that, amazing feeling of, oh my God, look at all the loot that I get to look through now. It's just one or two things here and there. So it also has an identity crisis if you think about it, because, yeah, we always compare it to Borderlands. We compare it to Halo. We compare it to Call of Duty. But does it really do any of those things correctly, or does it sort of steal a lot of concepts and do some of those concepts, in my opinion, poorly? And that's something that I think a lot of people, once they get done with the hype, are going to look at and realize that this game, even though it had a massive budget, should be considered one of the biggest flops, because you had that amount of money, yet it was spent with a game that has an identity crisis, with a piss poor storyline, poor voice acting, and yeah, decent gameplay. But decent gameplay can only carry a game so far, in my opinion.
I think all those things that you're missing, like the weapons, the guns, the areas, that's all behind a paywall. I bet you money, because you said that's going to be a 10-year game, right?
Yeah, that's another thing. So let's go ahead and get into that. I know this is running really far, but let's go ahead and talk about that. So my story is, so I went into GameStop, right? I'm a very good procrastinator with pre-ordering games. It was maybe 4 hours before the launch of Destiny. I'm like, I want to pre-order this game. They still said that I could pre-order. I'm going to go in and pre-order it. Why not? I want my extra little tiny special edition Sparrow that I get to ride around, whatever. Okay. So I go into GameStop and get in line. People are, there for Destiny, asking about when their, midnight launch is, when do they open their doors, stuff like that. And so I go to, pre-order it, and they're like, all right, well, we're not sure we still pre-order. I'm like, I just called and you guys said I could still pre-order. I literally live 5 minutes away. I just called you guys like 10 minutes ago. And so they're like, all right, well, yeah, we should be able to pre-order it. And so they look for my Halo Master Chief Collection pre-order, because I had that pre-order with $20 on it, because I wanted to move that on top of my Destiny pre-order. That way I only have to pay, $40. And so they figured out a way to do it. They said, oh, well, we're just going to have to run it through like you're purchasing it. It's no problem. We will get this done. And they're like, you're not here for the midnight launch though, right? I'm like, no, I'm not here for the midnight launch whatsoever. And so we get that done. They, get it pre-ordered and everything for me, because that was fine. I come back the next day, because they said that I would have to come back next day, show my receipt, and say, hey, there was a problem with how they pre-ordered it, because they pre-ordered it as I was there to pick it up. So they acted as if I already had the game and I already brought the game to my house and I already own it. So they screwed that up on that end. And so I come back the next day. They have to go through the entire inventory of Destiny. I kind of feel bad for the guy. There's probably a lot of copies in the back, just to make sure that there was one extra copy. But one of the things that the girl said while she was ringing me up was that, and this was the funny part, she was trying to sell me off on their $3 insurance for their game disc. And she's like, do you want to purchase the $3 insurance for the game disc? Destiny is going to be a 10-year game like World of Warcraft. You want to make sure you protect that disc. And honestly, I was tired. I wasn't really paying attention to, grasp that a lot, because I probably would have laughed at her if I did. But I was thinking to myself, 10 years? I can only think of a handful of games, like EverQuest, Astron's Call, and I think that game's even shut down. Ultima Online, World of Warcraft's approaching 10 years. And you're telling me that Destiny on anemic consoles it's gonna last 10 years? I mean, you're talking about Activision here. They're going to be making a Destiny 2 probably in the next couple of years. I mean, I'm calling it now. It just made no sense to me. 10 years? It's very rare you see an MMO even last 10 years active, as far as profits-wise go. Because you think of Destiny and you think of Activision, you think of World of Warcraft. As soon as Activision sees and Blizzard sees that World of Warcraft's not that profitable as pay-to-play anymore, they're flipping that free-to-play switch immediately. It's going to happen. And so with Destiny, that game's probably going to die out. I wouldn't be surprised if it died out as fast as Titanfall did, honestly. But if it even lasts like 3 or 4 months before it dies out, and then it's going to have a fraction of the population when they release an expansion pack, and then a fraction less when they release the next expansion pack, and they're just going to lose more and more of their population as they release expansion packs. Because this game, it's not massive enough. It's not an MMO enough in order for it to last. even over a year without some serious help with extra expansions. And even then, if people have to pay for those expansions, we see the same thing with World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft right now, and it's getting fairly close to Warlords of Draenor's launch, only has about 2 million pre-orders out of the total of about, I think, 6 or 7 million people that play that game currently. And they're losing and bleeding subscribers like crazy. They bled over 800 million subscribers before the expansion came out. And yeah, they'll gain a couple of those back once Warlords comes out, because I'm one of those, statistics. I quit the game till Warlords comes out. But Destiny is not an MMO. It's not massive enough to be considered an MMO. Even I would consider an online FPS. But since I, put stuff up on MMO site and they want to see content for Destiny, I guess in that case, it is going to be an MMO, So it doesn't make sense to me why she would even think it's going to be a 10-year game. And that just really goes to show how much GameStop, for example, really likes to convince you to spend more money there. Because like I said to you before we began this, they were trying to convince a 12-year-old kid to get the extra expansion pass for Destiny. Because, it's 2 extra expansions. And so he asks his dad, he's like, Dad, can I get the expansion pass? And his dad's like, what's the expansion pass? And it's like, it's like extra DLCs. It's like, no. It's like you're telling this like probably 40, 50-year-old guy to spend $60 on a game that he probably doesn't even give 2 shits about. And his 12-year-old son's like, Daddy, spend $35 more on this game for me, please. Makes no sense to me, man. It really doesn't.
I don't get it either.
Maybe, like I said, maybe it'll last a year, maybe 2 years if it's lucky. 10 years, I'll bet you a lot of money it will not last that long.
Well,
it's just not.
That's probably just them trying to get that insurance money out of you too. Even if it's $3, that's $3 per copy. So
Oh yeah, and she acted like she was brand new to GameStop and everything too. Because a lot of times when I go in there, they recognize me. They don't even ask me about that type of thing because they just look at me like, oh, this guy isn't, he's not going to go for it. But they asked the next guy in line about it. They screwed up that pre-order so bad. It was hilarious, honestly. I was thinking I was going to walk out of GameStop without Destiny because of how bad they screwed that up. Because if they would have been even on their stock, I would have probably had to have been in there and like argue with them just to get my copy of Destiny because of how badly they screwed it up. And yeah, fault is on myself as well for waiting so long to pre-order a game 4 hours before it releases. Mm-hmm. But if they tell you that you could pre-order it, they should allow you to pre-order it and you should have no issues. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, what did you just say, Lugo? I coughed.
Oh, I said I just have no idea with Destiny's budget. I have no idea why people think it's gonna be a 10-year game like World of Warcraft. It just does not make sense. I'm an MMO veteran. I played hundreds of MMOs. I've done a lot of videos for MMOs. I think I'm like over 250, 260 videos on my channel. Most of those first looks for MMOs. So about over 200 MMOs I've done first looks for. And this game, I would bet that a free to play game that launches over here soon called Blade and Soul is gonna last way longer than this game is.
Okay, so apparently Lugo and I have no idea whatsoever where the other $400 million went. We are hoping that it went to advertising revenue. We do not think it's a real MMO, but it's partly an MMO, but it's partly a co-op game, but it's partly a first-person shooter that has really not that much depth to it. We don't think it's going to last 10 years. GameStop has backwards-ass pre-orders. I mean, it's just a normal game. It's not all the hype, but that's normally what happens with games like that, like Watch Dogs. A lot of hype, games pretty mediocre. Would you say that Destiny's pretty mediocre as in like average, or would you say it's like, oh, it's excellent for a shooter though? Like, how would you describe that?
If you look at its budget and look at what the outcome was, I would say it's pretty mediocre. If you look at whether or not the game itself, with completely ignoring the budget, I would say it's about a 7 out of 10. 7.5, 8, 8.0 being generous. So an 8 out of 10 being very generous. It would, it's a solid game, but I just can't get over the budget. You know what I mean? I can't look at that 500 million and say, oh, this game isn't a flop. Because in my opinion, gameplay wise, for 500 million, it is a flop. As far as looking beyond the budget, it's an all right game, but it's not going to last 10 years.
I think I totally agree with that. Yeah, we'll never figure out where that $500 went. It went to hookers. We came to that conclusion a long time ago, didn't we?
Hookers a blow.
Hookers and blow. That's where that money went. Yeah, they get paid well for a reason over there at Bungie and Activision, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
Got to have some benefits, you know?
yeah, I mean, you got to keep your workers sane. I mean, even if because they brought in 150 people on Halo Reach, but 500 people on Destiny still doesn't account for it. There's nothing to account for it. It's just not, that makes no sense. No sense. It had to be advertising and hookers. It just had to be.
It had to be. It's
Yeah,
the
no other
only
way about it.
logical. It's the only thing that's logical.
Yeah. Hell, man, if I had all that money to spend, I'd be getting hookers too. No problem, all the time. Why not?
All day, every day.
That's right. They got to be clean hookers too, and those are more expensive.
Exactly. Premium hookers, premium blow. I mean, and none of that, you know, this half cup blow. I mean, we got to have pure stuff, you know, got to have really clean hookers. They had to, you know, not had sex for over 3 months, make sure they don't have AIDS creeping up on them. You know, it's just got to be all premium. It had to have been.
Yeah, I mean, you got that money to blow on a game that's pretty average. Yeah, that's what you got to do. You got to do that, I guess. I don't know. But guys, you go ahead and go check out Luga Entertainment. He's a good guy. Does a lot of good stuff with MMOs, especially if you like MMOs. That's all he talks about. I've never been too big into MMOs, so he's trying to get me into them. He probably never be able to, but he's going to try, I'm sure. But all right, guys, see you later. Zach, any last words?
Nope, that's it.
That's it. All right,
That's
man.
it.
Thanks for
Have a
being
good
on.
one, guys.
See you guys later.